Antifa's bad, really bad.
In the past year, it seems like Antifa has been everywhere. Building burned down in Minnesota? Antifa. Looting in Soho? Probably Antifa. Capitol violently overrun by people wearing MAGA hats? Definitely Antifa in disguise. And while we've been told that Antifa is a well-organized, well-funded network of violent extremists, historian Mark Bray says that's not it at all.
It's a radical left politics of opposition to the far right that doesn't rely on the police or the courts or the state to stop the fascist threat.
When Black lives are under attack,
what do? Stand up, fight back!
Sometimes I compare it to feminism, right? There are feminist groups, but feminism itself is not a group. There are Antifa groups, but Antifa itself is not a group. Anti-fascism, broadly speaking, goes back as far as fascism. Groups like the Arditi del Popolo, which oppose Mussolini's fascists, to groups like Anti-Fascist Action, which fought Hitler's Nazis in Germany, and many other anti-fascist forces in Europe and around the world.
Throughout World War II, fascists were pretty easy to spot. That became a little harder once they'd stopped wearing their brown shirts.
Many former fascists adjusted the language they used to describe their politics, adjusted the way they presented it, tried to sort of leech off of left-wing politics to make themselves more appealing. Anti-fascism, or Antifa, became this militant kind of rebirth of anti-fascism that refused to trust in the state or the government to stop the far right and believed in pushing them out of public spaces from below, in football stadiums, in punk venues, in communities. The anti-fascist argument is that you don't let fascism grow in any kinds of public or cultural spaces. And so these battles have been going on in these venues for decades.
So like 5 years ago, there's a radical left, but I didn't think I never heard of the word Antifa. When did Antifa become a weapon, rhetorically speaking, for the right, saying, hey, like the leftists want to ruin the country?
Most of the left didn't really care in the early 2010s. Anti-fascism was considered a low priority. This started to change, though, with the growth of the alt-right, with Donald Trump's presidential campaign. And so that's when it started to be more well-known among the left, and it took off in mainstream conversation. You could see a first step with the punching of Richard Spencer on Trump's inauguration day, even more so with the protest against Milo Yiannopoulos in Berkeley, when there was mass property destruction to shut down his event. Antifa was in the news then. And then it was a fait accompli with Charlottesville, when a fascist killed Heather Heyer. I thought that was sort of the end of the story for a little bit as far as the mainstream was concerned, but then Donald Trump's conspiracy theory accusations during the George Floyd protests last year brought it back into the conversation, and now it's a staple of the right-wing boogeyman industry.
All the violence is with these black hooded thugs, Antifa.
Is there any indication that Antifa elements were involved in antagonizing insurrectionist acts in the riot at the Capitol, the violence that we've seen politically these days?
Not really. Antifa groups are not numerous enough, and their membership is not significant enough, and their political influence is not significant enough for them to have had a disproportionate role in what was the largest mass uprising the U.S. has seen in half a century.
The difference between people like us and Antifa and BLM, we respect the law. We were good people. The government did this to us. We were normal, good, law-abiding citizens, and you guys did this to us. We want our country back.
And all those stories about rich liberals like George Soros paying Antifa thugs to go stir shit up.
This kind of anti-authoritarian, bottom-up, direct action-oriented kind of organizing doesn't rely on a lot of money. Accepting a donation from a millionaire would be anathema to what the anti-capitalist politics are anyway.
I understand there are some people who are anti-fascists who reject the use of violence as a tactic. There are those who use violence as a tactic. Why specifically violence as an anti-fascist tactic when you're confronting fascists?
The Antifa argument is that you don't let Nazis or fascists take even the first step towards achieving power because it's easier strategically to stop them before they've gotten there. That's not to say that violence is necessarily the first step. Most of what Antifa groups do involves monitoring the far right, figuring out who their leaders are, tracking them across different social media platforms, and then doing whatever they can to shut down their ability to organize and grow and establish themselves in society.
Whose streets? Our streets! Whose streets? Our streets!
You can't just say violence equals violence. Why it's done, who it's done against, and in what context matters a great deal. There's a big difference between attacking people of color or queer and trans people because of their identities on the right side versus attacking those who do that to stop them from doing that. That's a big difference, even if you disagree.